We're going to walk through 6 key areas of recent research that completely shatter the illusion of alcohol being good for you, even in moderation. My name's Leon Sylvester, I'm the founder of SoberClear.com, and let's begin with the most complex organ in the known universe, the human brain. For decades, the common belief was that alcohol only damaged your brain if you were an alcoholic, somebody who's on a park bench drinking from a paper bag. For everybody else though, alcohol was thought to be harmless. However, a massive 2022 study in the UK Biobank led by Professor Remy Daviet analysed the brain architecture of over 36,000 healthy adults and proved this to be a complete lie. The UK Biobank is a giant health library that has tracked 500,000 British volunteers with biological material and tests and questionnaires since 2006. This research study focused on grey matter volume. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what grey matter is. It's the processing power of your brain. It's where information gets handled and where decisions are made and where memories are stored. The data here showed something brutally simple. The more you drink, the more grey matter that you lose. It's a steady slope with a clear dose-response relationship. And even from the first drink, the scan picked up changes. For example, we can see that moving from 1 drink to 2 drinks per day accelerates this decline, and when you go from 2 to 3 drinks per day, the cumulative effect can mimic more than half a decade of aging in vulnerable regions. The paper gets a little bit more specific, because the damage targets the hippocampus. This is the region of the brain responsible for learning and memory. To understand this, think of your life as a transcription. The hippocampus would be the pen. When you drink, you're essentially drying out the ink. You aren't just forgetting where you put your keys. You're actually compromising your ability to record your entire life. And we used to justify this by saying, well, at least I'm relaxing. But biology proves this to be a lie as well. Ethanol makes it more difficult for your brain cells to fire. It essentially inhibits them. So you aren't relaxing, you're anesthetizing. You're shutting down the hardware. Papers like this are the smoking gun. They prove that even moderate drinkers are walking around with smaller, older, less efficient brains than non-drinkers. If you value your intellect, your wit, and your memories, this data is impossible to ignore. Next, we move to the second area of research, and this one hits the sophisticated image of alcohol right between the eyes. You might have seen this person before, or maybe you are this person. You're health conscious. You buy organic vegetables, you exercise, you worry about consuming bad things, but then you go home and drink 2 glasses of wine to unwind. There's millions of people like this. Well, the Surgeon General's 2025 report smashed this myth, spelling out that even 1 drink a day increases the risk of several types of cancer, including breast cancer in women. Have no doubt, this is one of the starkest blind spots in modern wellness culture. The World Health Organization, as well as all major national and international health organizations, now classify alcohol as a Group 1 carcinogen. This puts it in the exact same category as asbestos, tobacco, and radiation. So how exactly does it do the damage? Well, it starts with how your body breaks down alcohol. The first stop on that journey is acetaldehyde, a breakdown product that is far more toxic than the alcohol itself. Acetaldehyde is like a microscopic shotgun blast to all of your cells. It smashes into your DNA, preventing the cells from repairing themselves. And when DNA cannot repair, it mutates. And when it mutates, you get cancer. The research shows that this isn't just a risk for heavy drinkers. Light to moderate drinking fuels a massive percentage of alcohol-related cancers, particularly breast cancer in women and cancer of the oral cavity in men. It's a pretty terrifying realization. We wouldn't smoke a moderate amount of cigarettes. We wouldn't inhale a moderate amount of asbestos. Yet, because of how we've been conditioned to see alcohol, we happily drink a moderate amount of a carcinogen and call it self-care. The World Health Organization, as well as all other major health organizations, have long stripped away the glamour and left us with the cold, hard, biological reality. Alcohol causes cancer. Now, let's talk about the lie that people often tell themselves about aging. So, I talk to a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s as part of my work with my company. Many people tell me similar stories. They say, Leon, I'm getting older these days. I wake up, I feel tired, I feel stiff, my knees pop, my balance is off. And a lot of people accept this physical decline as the inevitable tax of being alive. They think that this is just what happens when time passes. But they're not really seeing the full story. Frailty isn't just a word for being weak. It's the state where your body becomes brittle. Your physiological reserves hit empty and you start to lose bone density, which is a condition known as osteopenia. So when you combine these things together, you get a body that is prone to falls, fractures, and accidents. So here's where alcohol walks into the picture. Scientific research shows a strong, undeniable link between drinking and the early rapid onset of frailty. In 2022, a large meta-analysis found the risk of hip fractures starts climbing after just 3 drinks per day. And in older adults, a hip fracture after 65 is no small thing. Roughly 1 in 3 will die within a year of that fracture. Think of each of your bones like a construction site. Every day, old bone is being broken down and new bone is being built. It's a constant renovation project, and it relies on a precise balance between the cells that tear down and the cells that build up. Alcohol barges into this delicate balance like a bull in a china shop. It suppresses the cells responsible for building new bones while also raising cortisol and lowering sex hormones. The result is a chronic deficit, where more bone is being taken away than is being replaced. Over the years, the whole structure of the skeleton drifts quietly from robust bones to porous bones, osteopenia. This leaves the person at a dramatically higher risk of falls and fractures, including potentially life-altering situations like hip fractures. And this is only half of the problem, because alcohol also wrecks balance and coordination. See, we used to think clumsy behavior was just a funny side effect of being drunk. The staggering, the slurred speech, we thought it was all temporary. But we now know that chronic alcohol use causes shrinking in the cerebellum, and this is the part of the brain that's responsible for motor skills and balance. And listen, the damage here can become permanent. This is often why we see older drinkers who don't walk with a stride and sometimes shuffle. They're kind of looking at their feet, and every step feels like this negotiation with gravity. When you put these two things together, the weaker bones and the damaged balance, you've got a perfect storm. You've got somebody who falls more often, and because alcohol has already thinned their bones, those falls can turn into fractures. Sometimes these fractures are life-changing, sometimes life-ending. Now, we have a very specific and very wrong image in our heads about liver damage. We know the stereotype of the real alcoholic with cirrhosis, yellow skin, jaundice, all of those things, the failing organs. We look at that extreme and say, well, that's not me. I've got a job, I drink nice wine, my liver's fine. But research into metabolic health has exposed a silent epidemic called fatty liver disease, specifically alcohol-associated fatty liver disease. And here's the scary part that the papers highlight. The part that should probably keep you up at night. You don't need to be a heavy drinker to trigger this. A 2016 research paper out of Germany by doctors Mali and Hellebrand highlights synergistic toxicity, where alcohol and excess body fat interact to amplify liver damage. Which means that if you're overweight, even just a little bit of the alcohol that you drink becomes significantly more toxic to your liver. The fat primes the liver for damage, and the alcohol lights the match. According to the paper, drinking more than 4 drinks a day if your weight is normal leaves you with a 46% chance of developing a fatty liver. But if you're simultaneously obese, your risk skyrockets to 95%. You see, your liver is the chemical processing plant of the body. It handles everything, but it treats alcohol as a poison because it is. So when the ethanol enters the system, the liver drops everything else it's doing. It no longer prioritizes burning fat or regulating blood sugar. Its only priority is to oxidize the ethanol and get it out of your blood before it kills you. So, because your liver is busy fighting the booze, it can't process dietary fat. And where does that fat go? Well, it gets stored, usually around the midsection, especially inside the liver. So many people end up getting that beer belly. And that beer belly is not a trophy of good signs. It's a sign that your liver is suffocating. That visceral fat wrapping around your organs is biologically active tissue that pumps out inflammatory cytokines. This internal fat sets the ground for inflammation, which eventually can cause the liver tissue to start scarring. This scarring is called fibrosis, and it's generally irreversible. Listen, if you care about your metabolic health, you have to understand this. You can't just detox with a green juice in the morning if you're retoxing with wine every night. And you can't out-supplement a poisoned liver. Next, we have to tackle the biggest lie in the entire alcohol story. This is the lie that has kept millions of sensible people drinking under the banner of health. The lie is that wine is good for your heart. This myth comes from the French paradox, the observation that French people had low levels of heart disease despite eating cheese and drinking wine. And it's been great marketing. It sold bottles of the stuff. But it has been thoroughly and absolutely debunked by modern data. A 2023 meta-analysis led by Dr. Zhou and published in JAMA Network Open found no overall benefit. Any apparent protection at even very low levels is literally a statistical artifact from comparing drinkers to sick quitters. This is something called abstainer bias. Here's what that means in real life. If you lump all non-drinkers together, a lot of them don't drink because they're already sick. Some used to drink heavily and stopped because of health damage. Others have medical problems that mean that they can't drink at all. So if you end up comparing that group to light drinkers without adjusting for any of this, it looks like light drinkers are actually healthier. But as soon as you control for those factors, the benefits soon disappear. See, the heart-healthy glass of wine is a myth. It's marketing, not medicine. In reality, alcohol harms the cardiovascular system in several ways. One of the most important here is arterial stiffness. So you want your blood vessels to be elastic, like a brand new rubber band. They need to expand and contract with every beat of your heart to manage pressure. Alcohol turns your arteries into an old, dried out garden hose. Just think of a garden hose that's been left in the sun for 5 summers. It becomes brittle, it becomes hard. That's exactly what is happening in your vascular system. Alcohol spikes your cortisol and constricts your blood vessels, forcing your heart to pump harder against a stiffer system. This is why so many drinkers have unexplained high blood pressure. And here's the real problem. You don't feel high blood pressure immediately. You don't feel your arteries stiffening. You don't feel the plaque building up because your endothelial lining of your veins is inflamed. Instead, it's like compound interest for bad health. You might be fine at year 5, you might be okay at year 10, and then by year 20, the bill comes due. You don't need to wait for a heart attack or a stroke to prove the science right. The data is already here. That healthy glass of wine is a myth. It's a slow motion attack on the system that keeps you alive. And finally, we arrive at the #1 reason millions of people say that they drink alcohol for. If you ask anybody why they have that bottle of wine at 6 p.m, you're going to hear very similar answers. It chills me out, it calms me down, it helps me de-stress. We treat alcohol as a medicine for anxiety. We use it as this liquid mute button for the noise in our heads. But a classic review paper out of the University of Minnesota, led by Matt Kushner, showed that not only do we drink because we're anxious, but that drinking by itself is enough to cause a full-blown anxiety disorder. To understand why, it boils down to homeostasis. Homeostasis just means that your brain loves balance. It's always trying to keep your chemistry level in check. And here's what happens when you drink. Alcohol will flood your brain with GABA. GABA is the neurotransmitter that acts as the brakes. It makes you feel sedated, relaxed, and slow. At the same time, alcohol blocks glutamate. Glutamate is more like the gas pedal. It's responsible for alertness and anxiety. So for a few hours, you feel great. You're chemically sedated, but your brain isn't stupid. It notices that it's being artificially pushed towards sedation. So your brain fights back. It stops producing its own GABA because you've flooded it with artificial stuff and instead ramps up the production of glutamate, which is the anxiety chemical. It also releases dynorphin and cortisol. Dynorphin is your brain's own downer chemical. It slams the brakes on the feel-good dopamine and leaves you kind of feeling flat and dysphoric once the alcohol wears off. Cortisol is the body's main stress hormone. It raises heart rate, blood pressure, and anxiety, basically sounding a false alarm that something is wrong. So then, when the alcohol wears off, which usually happens at about 3 a.m, this is why you wake up and you're kind of confused and dehydrated. And often you can't go back to sleep. What's happening here is at this moment, the alcohol is gone, but your brain's countermeasures are still active. So you're left with low GABA and a surplus of glutamate and cortisol. So you feel jittery, you feel a vague sense of doom, you feel overwhelmed by small tasks. Listen, this isn't just a feeling, it's a chemical state of withdrawal. Eventually, if you keep on drinking through the years, the hormonal balance becomes permanent, even on your non-drinking days. Data shows us that regular drinkers have significantly higher baseline cortisol levels than non-drinkers. You're literally walking around with a hair-trigger stress response because of the booze. When you stop drinking, you break the loop. Rebalancing typically occurs within a few days or weeks, depending on how heavy your drinking was. But then you start to realize something. You start to realize that you weren't even a stressed person. You weren't nervous, you were poisoned. The calm that you've been looking for in a bottle was waiting for you on the other side of stopping drinking.